Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Ayala with Waterloo Greenway. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, we have just a couple things to go over with you all. We will be using the Q&A function to manage questions during today's webinar. Please submit your questions at any point during today's presentation and we'll make sure to go through them at the end of our event. This tour is being recorded and will be shared online. So if you'd like to rewatch or share with any of your friends, you can catch it on our website at waterloogreenway.org following the event. We can go to the next slide. So today we are taking a behind the scenes look at Waterloo Park. This is our monthly virtual tour series. So again, if you have to hop off or want to share it with a friend, we will be doing another tour in July. And our goal is really to continue showing our community what's going on behind the fence. Normally we would do these virtual tours in person instead. But of course right now we all really need to stay home. But it's important for us to keep showing you all how the park is looking. And we really want folks to be excited. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce our presenter today. John Rigdon, our Director of Planning and Design, will lead us through our construction and park progress. Thank you, John.
Great, thanks, Melissa, and thanks all for joining us today. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little context for the park, and then we'll dive into specific sites on the park and show you all some exciting construction updates. So Waterloo Park is phase 1 of Waterloo Greenway, which is a series of parks built over time and phases. Waterloo Park that you're seeing here is about 10.5 acres on its own. So it's a sizable park by itself. For comparison, any of y'all from the Houston area, this is about the same size as Discovery Green in Houston. So a very sizable park. And then in total, the Greenway will be about 35 acres of new and restored public open space along about 1.5 miles of restored Waller Creek. And that'll go from 15th Street, which you see on the right side of your screen there, all the way down to Lady Bird Lake. Waterloo Park is between 15th and 12th Street, and then Trinity and Red River. So it's just south of the new hospital and med school, and right near the Red River Cultural District, right on there. I'd also like to point out this time that, this project is built on partnerships, and there may be partners joining us today, and thank you to those of you who are on this call. But the sort of fundamental partnership to building Waterloo Park and the Greenways with the City of Austin. In particular, we work very closely with the Parks and Recreation Department and the Watershed Protection Department, who are vital in advancing the construction of Waterloo Park. Okay. So the vision for Waterloo Park when it's completed, this is a nighttime shot, and I'll talk about in detail about some of the features you see here. But this shows Waterloo Park with a large event happening in the evening. You can see this lit up white canopy structure, a large crowd gathered in the Great Lawn, and all the green space that makes up Waterloo Park. And about a little more than 6 months ago, in December, we were just kind of getting out of the ground of the building. So you can see some of the concrete walls coming up, a lot of empty park with dirt, a lot of utility work have been completed at this point, but not a lot above ground yet. This photo was taken just the other day. So you can see the tremendous progress which has happened in that time period. And a lot of the building is completed, and we're starting to put plants in the park as well. So I'll talk in detail about a lot of those changes that have happened. So let's get going. We're going to walk through the park at different stops that we would take you on if we were able to go on a physical in-person tour. So to try and best kind of mimic that experience as we can. So let's start walking. So one of the main entrances into the park and the Moody Amphitheater is across the 14th Street Bridge, which is no longer a vehicle bridge. It's been part of the park for a long time, from Red River Street and into this opening you can see here. When you walk in across the bridge, you'll see the state capitol in the background, and in the foreground, you'll see the Moody Amphitheater steel canopy roof, which is that white steel structure you see there. And you'll also see the buildings which support that. To your left and kind of right in front of you, you'll see a large open space, which will be a lawn. That'll be used for concerts and events, but also for general park use, like throwing the frisbee or walking your dog. If you turn to the right, when you walk in, you would see a stair and an elevator, which goes up to a plaza. And I'll show different views of this, but one of the goals of this building is it's occupiable wherever possible. So we've tucked a lot of the support structures down into the hillside and underground, and there's plazas and green roofs above, so it's, it can be used for park use. You'll also see on the right, just beyond the elevator, we have a ticket booth. So, if we have shows, community events, anything ticketed, you'll be able to come buy your tickets there during normal park hours. Here you can see, these beautiful curved concrete walls and also these openings that'll be concession points of sale. So, speaking about the concrete first, one of the features of this is these smooth curved concrete walls, and they're going to remain concrete. We'll have plants which grow up and vines which grow up them, so it'll be sort of concrete with a green vine. And we really like the way that'll balance against all the green in the park with all the plants we're planting. Also here, it's important to highlight, one of the things that we really heard from the community when we were planning this park, as well as our partners in the Parks and Recreation Department, was a lot of parks that have large-scale events have to deal with long-term impacts from those events. So you'll have a temporary event, you'll bring in all the temporary restrooms and concessions, and you have long periods of time after you bring all that stuff out where the grass has to heal and recover, and you'll have areas in the park that are closed. So when we were designing this park, one of the things we looked to do was to create permanent infrastructure to support concessions and restrooms for the full capacity of any events in this space. So you'll see kind of in these curved walls, those openings are concessions, and we're able to open them all for a large sort of max capacity event, which would be around 5,000 people. Or we can open a few of them for a smaller event or park use, or none of them for a general park use where appropriate. And people can still walk around and enjoy these plaza spaces. Similarly, we have restrooms for a capacity of up to 5,000, and those may be open or closed depending on size as well. So the goal here is none of those temporary restrooms and other things which really impact the park and may require longer closures. So say we have an event in the evening, the event's loaded out, all of this is closed down. The next day, the park is back open to the public to use for just general park use. And you can see this is in progress. You can see those walls, and then there'll be doors in those gaps in the walls. Walking a little bit further to the south, we're going to go to the lower lawn. So we call this whole green area in the middle the Great Lawn. And the lower lawn portion is a flatter space, which during general park use will be a just great open lawn. During shows, there may be temporary seating put in place here. The view of the stage, if you look straight ahead and you can see the steel canopy roof above, the performers will perform right up here on the stage during a performance, or there may be a speaker up there or anything like that. During general park use, we have a ramp and a stairs. This is an area where folks could hang out, eat, enjoy the shade, and there's also rain protection up here from a clear skylight system. So the sun will still come through, and you can see it kind of gets filtered almost like a trellis, but there will be rain protection. You also get a good shot here of those concrete walls without the vines yet that will grow up them, but you get a sense of the size of those walls. Here's a closer look. The canopy itself above is made from many layers of this 6-inch steel I-beam painted white, as well as custom trusses that hold it all together. So you can see how that stacked steel creates these unique shade patterns on the ground below. Also, you can note here all these really thin columns. The columns contain, the electrical, any plumbing and rainwater that needs to move down there, but they also are intended to be very thin and sort of elegantly hold up the structure and make it look very light. And you can see how they sort of land in various places throughout the stage and into the lawn. The stage here, this is where the stage will be, just elevated slightly above the lawn here. Another view that shows the different layers of steel all stacked together. And you can see how it extends both over the stage and out over some of the plaza spaces above and below. And here is a view of the side, a sort of profile of all those stacked layers of steel. So we're at the top layer of steel now. This is as thick as it's going to be. Right now, the folks working on it are putting in that skylight system I mentioned, which provides the rain protection. That's what he's up there doing right now, is working on that. And here's a view from straight on. This is like the best seat in the house during a show where the sound mix position would be, and the performers would be right back here up on stage. So that's where we are. This is recently, a couple weeks ago. And then this was the vision. So you can see, we're getting really close to that. We got to plant the grass and other plantings and plant the vines on the wall, but we're very close. So now we're going to take a quick detour and, jump down to the southwest corner of the park and talk about a really exciting event that happened recently with a tree transplant. In total, we've done 8 large tree transplants on site, accommodating trees from the state, the University of Texas, adjacent developers, and internal tree relocations that would have been impacted by utilities or other park work, which was required to complete the park. And saving these trees has been one of our big project goals, because not only do they have generations that they've survived and have much more to give us, but also they offer great shade and habitat day one. And it takes a long time for a lot of smaller trees to grow to be of that size to provide those benefits. So most recently, and you may have seen this on our social media, we worked with a developer adjacent to our home in Symphony Square. And so this is our office right here, Symphony Square. And the developer adjacent to us, Greystar, reached out, and they had this great heritage tree, live oak, right next to us, and reached out to see if there was a way that we could work with them to move that tree onto Waterloo Park. So this tree, just some quick facts on that. It's a 26-inch diameter trunk, live oak. It weighs around 150 tons and is over 100 years old. So, a major long-term tree that's really healthy and doing well. So, with the generous contribution from Greystar and working with us, we were able to relocate that tree to a great new home in the southeast corner of Waterloo Park, right at the trailhead, which provides great shade for, the future of the park. So, the way this works is actually the tree was, dug up and the root ball was secured, and then it was moved about a block from that location on these inflatable bags that you see here, these bags right here. And so it was rolled using these large earth movers to its new home about a block away on the street. And so here it is in its final home. It hasn't, been put in the ground yet. It has since this photo was taken, and if you go by the site now, you'll see it fully in its new home. But this is its location in the southeast corner of the park. This is a major trailhead, so folks will come in off Red River and enter here, and in the future go all the way down the trail or enjoy this area of the park. So it'll provide great shade day one for all of our park visitors. So another great example of all the partnerships that help make this park happen. Jumping back to kind of our normal tour stops, we're going to take a look at the Backstage area. Like I said earlier, one of the goals was to build all of the infrastructure in order to accommodate all the community events, contemporary music performances, dance, theater, all the types of events that we love to have in our parks, but often require a huge amount of temporary infrastructure to be built in order to make them happen. So we wanted to build that as permanent infrastructure and integrate it into a park. So the way we achieved this was putting a lot of this underground into the hillside with green roofs and plazas on top, and then making it occupiable during normal park use. So this is a look, walking from the Backstage area out onto the stage. So this is what your artist will see when they come out to do a performance on stage. They'll be walking out of their dressing rooms and right here onto the stage. Here's just another look to show you kind of what that stage looks like up close. And then here's the entrance into the artist area of the back of house. There's another entrance over here for the loading dock. In total, we've got 6 artist dressing rooms, a green room, offices for the crew that support production. We've got 3 loading docks, 2 for 18-wheelers, 1 for a box truck, medical rooms, ticket office, concession office, all of the supporting structures required to put on these types of events. This photo is old, but I like it because it kind of shows you this, before we put in all the walls, it shows you this back of house area underground, and you can see where those columns from the canopy roof land at different locations into the building. So up above you have that white steel roof creating a plaza above, and they drop down through that plaza and into the foundation. And so, the next thing we did was build the walls to create all the rooms in this back of house space. So again, this is a little bit older, it's pretty much completed now, but you can see how we kind of had to fit those walls in between all the columns that land here and create these spaces for the artists and staff that'll help put on these events. Walking a little further to the south, we're going to move through the sort of deck around these great heritage trees, past the family pavilion and up onto the Deal Booth Promenade. We have these two wonderful heritage oaks that have been here for generations before this was even a park, and they've long been a feature of the park, and we wanted to continue that use and really highlight it. So just adjacent to the amphitheater and at one of the main entrances into the park, we're creating this large oval deck. This allows for people to utilize the shade under the trees and sit, and I'll show you some important things that it's adjacent to that help enhance that. But also I want to point out here, we worked very closely with city arborists and our own contracted arborists to create this deck in a way that enhances and doesn't negatively impact the trees. So you can see that steel structure and the foundations all were sort of woven in between the roots so that we wouldn't have any negative impacts on the roots of the tree. Same with the steel placement, so that we give the tree plenty of room to to grow and breathe, but also be able to bring people close to it. And so you can see, the crews right now working on finishing the steel structure, and on top of that, we'll have a wooden deck with permanent seating, but also a lot of temporary seating that will come in. Also, kind of through the middle of those trees is one of the major entrances into the park. So park goers will walk off Trinity Street under the beautiful canopy structure, under these beautiful trees, and out into Waterloo Park. As they walk through, on their right, they'll see the family pavilion building, which is this concrete structure you see here. So right now we're standing on the deck that I was just showing you and walking into the family pavilion. This structure was designed by Michael Shue, Office of Architecture, great local architect, and they worked with a lot of the sort of language of the design of the Moody Amphitheater that I just showed you, that has its own unique features which set it apart and really make for an interesting pavilion building. Looking into the future, you can see the family pavilion building here. It'll have food trucks next to it. This for us was one of these great moments of collaboration with the community. Originally, we had this as a park cafe, and we started down that path of design. When we engaged with the community about this, we heard a lot of feedback that a cafe might be too high of a price point for a family to come and enjoy, lunch during the day. Also, it wouldn't allow us the flexibility to highlight a lot of different local food vendors and really open up the opportunity to partner with us and businesses to partner and work in the park. So, after a lot of that feedback, we adjusted course and we designed this pavilion structure, which will house the restrooms, storage, trash and janitorial for the food service. But then we have these slots with all the amenities, hookups, power, and water to support 2 food trucks. And so these will be, these won't change every day, but these will be longer term temporary food truck slots. And that gives us the opportunity to, work with a lot of different community food vendors and provide, a lower price point than a brick and mortar cafe here would. And we really like what it did for the design overall. It really opened things up and ended up being a great opportunity. Looking at that pavilion, this is in progress, but you can see the concrete and the similarities to the amphitheater that I mentioned. In the middle here, there's going to be a large vessel sink. And on the left, we have 3 unisex restrooms. On the right is the storage space. Another sort of cool part of, working with our peer parks in Austin, but also around the country, we identified what they really have learned from public restrooms and parks like this. One of the big lessons for us was, you need a sink a lot more than you might need a bathroom. So we pulled the sinks out of the restrooms and put it in the center in this vessel area. So, if a kid just needs to wash his hands from playing in the mud, they can come in here and quickly wash hands. We'll also support programs or runners or other folks who just might want to rinse up and don't necessarily need to use the bathroom. So separating those and creating this big open sink area is one of those things. The other thing which we really adapted to was creating a lot of storage to support programs. This park is going to have lots of programs and events of all sizes throughout the year. So anything from small art and educational classes to medium-sized yoga classes to beginnings or ends of 5Ks to large-scale dance, theater, and music events. So we're going to have that full range here. So anywhere where we can squeeze in some storage to support those is really critical. So this room will, store a lot of that thing, think signs, yoga mats, all those types of things which really support programs. Moving up the hill, we move to the Deal Booth Promenade. This is one of the highest points in the site. And one of the real challenges and opportunities for the design was how do we navigate 50 feet of elevation change from the southwest corner of the park down to the southeast corner of the park. And as our design team looked at this challenge, they saw a real opportunity, working with our goal of universal accessibility. And one of those goals was we don't want to have switchback ramps and elevators everywhere in order to provide ADA accessible connections. We want shared connections which navigate the grade. So, this sort of meandering elevated path through the tree canopy navigates that significant grade change and creates these beautiful views out over the park. It'll ultimately have a handrail, so don't worry, nobody's falling off the sides of this. And then if you look at it from the side, this beautiful thin concrete profile with these slim columns supporting it. And what that allows is we're going to plant all underneath this, so it'll be moving through this wonderful tree canopy, but also there's paths that go under it. So you think about these opportunities for play or engagement where you'll have someone up above and someone down below crossing paths. And the paths down below really work through garden spaces, so they're kind of more exploratory and slower paced. And the path up on the promenade is much wider, so that's somewhere where people could move at higher speed if they wanted to for exercise, or other folks could sort of sit and lean over the railing and enjoy the view. And the views will be spectacular looking out towards the amphitheater or towards downtown. Just a cool detail on this, that I really like. This shows how the really thin profile of that elevated curved walkway was formed up. It was post-tensioned, and you can see those cables in there, and also the rebar. And then this unique supporting structure was built to hold all of that in place so the concrete could be poured. So you can just see the amount of work that goes into creating this really beautiful thin profile of that elevated promenade. I'm moving forward a little bit more to the Kitty King Powell lawn. One of the other features of this park is obviously we want to create spaces for play. Working with MVVA, Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, who's our primary landscape designer, and the Parks and Recreation Department, they really kind of honed in on this idea of nature play, nature-based play. And, this area, the Kitty King Powell lawn, is kind of the invitation to a lot of that nature play. So we have these, more traditional play elements, but with a more natural lens, like this wooden log climber, what we call mega grass, which is in the foreground here, which is a sort of toddler play area, and a large stone slide back here. Those have very natural elements, but are familiar as play structures. What that allows, and our playscape designers really worked with us on this, is it allows kind of an introduction to play with all the other things which might not be as traditional, like working through the gardens, climbing on some of these rocks, and meandering through the pathways. So these are kind of the signal that says this is an area to play, and then that invites further play into some of the more exploratory spaces. Here's a look recently at what that looks like. So obviously the climber's not in place yet, but the climber would be right here, and the slide will come down around this tree. And then this is before we pulled the forms off that walkway. So the walkway will be just up above, so you'll be kind of looking out over the play area and out into the amphitheater. And also we have these great trees which provide wonderful shade for these play areas, which is another design goal here. Here's a cool photo of the slide being built. I like this because we have these German playscape designers who worked on creating this stone slide that fits perfectly around that tree and in Waterloo Park. And part of the reason that we did that was folks here who maybe those of us who are a little bit past our play age are familiar with those hot metal slides that you often see in parks. We knew we couldn't do that. It's far too hot here in Austin for that. And we didn't want to have something like a bright plastic slide, which really didn't feel, connected with this nature-based play. So this is a stone slide, a smooth stone slide, which was custom built for that place in the park. And that's, transported to Austin now and is ready to go in once it's time and the plantings are in place. So that'll sort of work around that tree and add to the play. And if you look here, this is shot from up on Trinity Street. So right here where these vehicles are is where you'll have that big climbing structure. We'll have our mega grass over here in the shade of this tree. Then our slide will work its way down around this tree, this lower level where the climber is. All right, well, moving a little further to the south, we enter into the Hill Country Garden area. You know, this area, we have a lot of wonderful existing heritage live oaks that have been there again for generations. And you can see kind of the way the pathways meander through here. We're working around those trees and really using them as a park feature. We took advantage of the shade and the elevation, a lot of the rocky outcropping that happens up here to create this hill country garden with a lot of shade tolerant native species planted in and around those trees, and then pathways which work their way through those garden areas. So this is the high point of the site, you know, right near where you enter on Trinity and 12th Street. You see the Capitol Visitors Garage right there, kind of off screen, and the Capitol's just over here. And folks will come walking in here. Then what we've done is create kind of these seating areas on either side of that pathway, which invites you down into this garden space. You can kind of see it here, and I'll show it in the next slide. But underneath here, we have all these broken up stone pieces. This is really a waste product from quarries. When they create that facing stone that you use on a lot of residential projects, these are the broken off pieces, which are just sort of discarded. You know, in line with our sustainability goals and kind of opportunistic values of looking for cool products when we can, this stone was taken and repurposed to create these kind of informal pathways, which meander through the garden spaces. And so right now, this is very recent. We've just started our planting, so we're putting in smaller trees and shrubs. And you can see the way these we call them scramble paths, made of that waste product stone work their way through here. So when this is all planted out and built, this will be those areas where children can run around and play and explore the garden, and it connects over to the play area back here. Or, you know, anyone can just enjoy a nice quiet walk through the garden really close to a lot of these wonderful native plantings we'll have in the ground here. I'll show another photo at the end which shows this in more, you know, clarity, but here you can see soils too. You know, one of the challenges on site was the quality of soil was just really degraded from years of being a construction site, flooding and everything else which Waller Creek has experienced. So we're bringing in tons of topsoil to help enhance the growth of these new trees and plants we're putting in. And you can see it here, and I'll show an aerial photo which really highlights the difference in those soils. So the soils are coming in now, the irrigation's coming in, you can see it here, and then we're bringing in all the plantings, and that's, you know, happening as we speak. Here's a view looking again from Trinity Street down towards the southeast corner. So, you know, our office is at Symphony Square just back here. You can see that walkway and the seating on either side of it, and then all those plantings going in around that stone scramble I just showed you. The sort of meandering pathway through here also has a lot of great outlooks into garden areas into the park, and it works its way underneath that elevated canopy over here just off screen. So jumping back, you can see here how it goes underneath the, you know, promenade. Here's a look at those pathways moving through the garden areas. You can see how we kind of move them in and out of the trees. And one of the cool features here, which has since been poured in place, is we have a permeable pavement material for these paths. So water actually drains through it, which is really helpful for, you know, creating, you know, less runoff, and it works really well with the garden spaces. Also, you can see here, and all the elbows of these paths, we've created custom seating areas where we can in the shade, where folks can sit and enjoy the garden. So they'll look out over the garden spaces and the kind of elbows of the path. And here's a sort of up close view of those benches. So these were custom cast in place benches, and they'll have a nice wood topper on there that's a more comfortable seat. So you can just, you know, sit here and look out over the garden and watch your kids play, or, you know, and enjoy the space underneath these beautiful live oaks and their shade they provide. Again, in the background here, you can kind of see how the elevated promenade moves over top, and then the plantings and walkways move underneath. So a lot of really interesting grade changes where these pathways intersect with each other. And here's another view of one of those seating areas, you know, right now, very recently taken with that permeable pavement in place. And then ultimately, it'll look roughly like this once all of the plantings are in place. So you can see how we're, you know, creating in the sunny areas little patches of garden, and the shaded areas some more shade tolerant plantings. And so the idea is, you know, this, you know, and then there'll be scramble paths moving through them so people can really get up close and personal with the garden areas, and, you know, educational opportunity for those smaller classes that we'll bring in to help with this. So now I'm going to show y'all some aerial views I think they really help, show the scale of this and a lot of the progress that's happening. And so we'll move clockwise around the park and really get a sense of all the things that are changing. Here's a view over top of kind of the hospital garage, kind of where we started with our earlier views. You look down, you can see the canopy right here. You can see those concession areas I showed you earlier, the plaza on top and the stair that goes down with the elevator from earlier, that large deck back here. One other cool thing I'll point out here is right here you see this large white area. This is a foam material, which we're using to build up the hillside. So there's less weight on this elevated lawn structure, which reaches out over the creek. So this lawn helps us reclaim about an acre, or half acre, sorry, of park space, which was, turned into this really important structure, which is the flood control tunnel, which takes a lot of this land out of the floodplain. But we're able to sort of create this highway bridge almost, which reaches out over the creek and has this lawn. Once we build up the hill with the foam and dirt and put plantings on top of it, this will be the back of a gently sloping lawn that moves down towards the stage. So, you bring your picnic blanket and come out here and set up at the top of the hill to enjoy a show down here. Here's another view of that. You can see the stage here, concessions, and then, the pathway which winds its way through the park. Moving to the southeast corner, here is that tree that we just transplanted. So you can see its new home at this, important corner. And then ultimately, when the park is completed, there'll be a major trailhead here as the trail along the Greenway moves down here underneath this bridge and down south along Waller Creek. This will be a really important moment where people will enter into the Greenway. Also, we're working on completion of a wetland garden, which will be right here in the middle. A very garden-like wetland area, which will be kind of an anchor for this space. And we have the emergence of Waller Creek right here. So Waller Creek, as it begins after the dam here for the flood control tunnel, starts right here and moves its way down south. So a really important moment of interaction with the creek and with water. Moving around to 12th Street, you can see out over the Hill Country Garden, those pathways and seating areas I showed you and how they move underneath the Deal Booth Promenade, just right here. And then the other thing, I mentioned earlier is the soils. So you can see where those soils have come in versus the existing site soils. So we're starting to put the soil in place and starting to put the plantings in that soil and then working our way north. Moving around to Trinity Street, here is the family pavilion, the play area, and then we have that deck around those two great heritage oaks. So we'll have a food truck here where this red vehicle is, another one over here, and then folks will enter into the park across that deck. So this kind of gives a sense of the scale. This is a huge deck. It'll be able to sit dozens and dozens of people. And moving down this way, you can see the aerial view of the steel canopy above the stage. Folks will enter here off Trinity Street, above the stage, but on a plaza. Then you can come around here onto this plaza and go down into the park here. Or you can go this way, out through that deck around those heritage oaks and into the park. Also here, I can point out, more of the back of house to support this event space. We have the loading docks here, which are kind of tucked away. You won't see these from anywhere in the park because we'll never have this elevation. And then looking from the north to south, I'm sort of hovering above the new med school. You can see Waller Creek, which is being restored here as part of the project. This is all being restored. And then you see, the canopy here, the lawn, and then the park beyond. So with that, that's the conclusion of our tour, and Melissa and I will take any questions y'all have.
Yeah, thank you, John. That was a really great overview. We're always so excited to be able to show off the park so you all can see what's going on behind the scenes. We do have a couple questions that have come through on our Q&A in the chat. The first one, someone mentioned they heard some talk about dogs in the park. So they asked, are dogs allowed once the park opens?
Yeah, so we're planning to allow dogs, and we're taking cues from our partners at the Parks Department about rules regarding those dogs. So you can certainly plan for dogs on leash in Waterloo Park.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have a question about the water collection systems and if you could describe the function of that.
Sure. So I'll talk about the tunnel, which is kind of the big, feature in the park, but also some other more localized water collection and cleaning features we have. So obviously there's the Waller Creek Flood Control Tunnel, which is kind of in the center of the park, and I'll sort of jump back here to show you guys. So right here, we've got the big inlet facility and the pond. Waller Creek historically is very prone to flooding, and the city invested in building this flood control tunnel, which really is the backbone of the park that we're able to build. It takes about 30 acres of downtown out of the floodplain, including a lot of the area around here in Waterloo Park, which allows us to build the park. And basically the water from the Waller Creek watershed comes down here into the pond and then is diverted down into a tunnel which runs underneath the city and comes out at Lady Bird Lake. So that allows this area to the south to not flood as frequently. The other cool feature of this is it pumps water in a reverse fashion up the creek and releases it here. So we no longer have those incredibly dry periods in the summer where the creek, basically goes completely dry. So we have more control over a constant flow of water in the creek. We also have a cleaner creek because this facility captures debris as well. So that really helps keep the creek clean as a major feature in the site. And there's a team dedicated to keeping this running and keeping Waller Creek clean. The other thing which I'll point out is within the site, we have a lot of smaller and innovative water quality features. So, one of those, which is, really interesting to me, is we have a large cistern here underneath the front of the stage. And what that cistern does is, in order to keep a lawn for events and park use open, we have to water it a lot. So, we're watering that lawn, but recapturing that water in the cistern, and then it's being treated through a series of rain gardens that eventually gets released back down into the creek. So that's one of those opportunities where we're looking to incorporate our sustainability values into some really unique features in the park.
Yeah, thank you for that. And sustainability is, we're a park environmental organization, so sustainability is one of the most important things for us. The question that I just saw pop up several times is about park opening.
Yeah, so we're still moving ahead and hoping to complete construction later this year. Park opening, a lot of that's going to be determined based on factors outside of our control, with health in the community. And so we're keeping our eye on when the best date is, but there'll be more information to come in the next months on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's excited and we can't wait to be able to invite you all in person. We have a question about tree plantings. So if you could tell us again about the relocated trees and then other plantings and vegetation in the park.
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, we have 8 significant tree relocation transplants on site. So 4 of those were internal relocations that had conflicts with utilities or other things which would have required them to be removed. And instead we worked to relocate them to other areas on site. We worked with the state and the city to relocate a really significant heritage live oak from the Capitol Complex expansion to the north. There are 2 relocations coming from the University of Texas that were impacted by the straightening of Red River through campus. So that was another sort of multi-jurisdictional partnership which saved a couple of great heritage live oaks. And then the most recent one is a partnership with the developer Greystar, our neighbor at Symphony Square, to move that 26-inch live oak to the southeast corner of the park. So we're always looking for those opportunities where we can, within reasonable budget and schedule, to bring in those trees because they're such great assets to the community. And on day one when the park opens, they're so much more impactful than a lot of smaller trees. That said, for the long-term health of the park, it's critical that we have much smaller trees which grow up in the environment of Waterloo Park. So in total, we're planting over 500 new trees in Waterloo Park and then thousands of shrubs and smaller plants. So those 500 trees will ultimately become the historic canopy of Waterloo Park over time, but that's decades because we want to do it right and not plant trees that are far too big and won't acclimate as well. So the big trees, we save them, they help us have great day one shade, and then the smaller trees grow in generationally and really create this as a thickly vegetated park.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the top 5 questions we get is about shade. So that's really important for us, and these trees are huge, so making that happen. Probably the first question we get with the community is about parking. So can you tell us about parking availability around Waterloo Park? You had highlighted one of the state parking garages adjacent to Waterloo Park as well.
Sure, and when we were putting this design together and first engaging with the design competition in the community, one of the things that people didn't want to happen was have the park turned into parking. And so we're not turning any of the park land into parking. However, we do have ADA parking right adjacent to the park on Red River and in a parking lot sort of across the street on 12th Street. It'll be right there and always available. And in addition to that, for special events and other park uses, we're working with our neighbors at the state and also developers across the street just below the screen to utilize underutilized parking in these large garages. So you can see these state garages right here. This is the visitor's garage, and these are other state garages. There's more off screen this way. There's thousands of parking spots in the immediate vicinity of here that aren't always in full use. So our goal is to work with those partners on utilizing that parking specifically for events, as well as there being significant amounts of on-street parking around here as well that could be utilized for park visitors. So those are, our parking goals, and we're working with our partners in Downtown Austin Alliance and others to make sure that we have a comprehensive parking approach when we move towards opening, and we'll have maps and everything else, so it's really clear where you can park.
Yeah, and I would just add that separate from the question, it's also important for us to be able to offer other ways of getting to Waterloo Park and Waterloo Greenway. So we are also working with the City of Austin on what bike, pedestrian, and transit options are available, along with working with our friends at Capital Metro on their transit options. And we've also been participating in the Project Connect process to help shape the future of transit in the Waterloo Greenway area. We have another question about people experiencing homelessness along Waller Creek and what our operational plans might be to address that in the park on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so that's it's certainly a challenge on on Waller Creek, and its proximity to a lot of the important services for the homeless community makes this a very important space for those folks to seek refuge. So we are in communication with the experts on this, which we are not, but we're learning. And our operational team is working with those folks, the service providers downtown, as well as the host team with the City of Austin, to make sure to share information and resources when folks are experiencing homelessness and are currently living on Waller Creek. And a lot of that too is letting people know when construction is going to happen, as we had to do on Waterloo Park, because it's really unsafe for anyone to be living in these areas when construction is ongoing. So working with those folks to inform them of the timeline so that they have time to relocate and not be in dangerous areas. Long term, this will be about partnership, like so much else we're doing. We don't have the solution, but we as an organization are engaged with efforts to address homelessness, provide affordable housing, and looking to those experts where we can for guidance on how we can handle those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, John. So that takes us to our last question, which is about future phases of the Waterloo Greenway project, along with what's north of Waterloo Park. So could you tell us a little bit about our phases 2 and 3, and then maybe talk a little bit about Waller Creek outside of our geography?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, Waterloo Greenway is 35 acres. This is 10 and a half of them. There's a lot more to come to be excited about. So phase 2, we call Creek Delta, which is from 4th Street down to the lake. And we're nearing construction on that. So we hope to be in construction in the first quarter of next year. We're completing construction documents and are going to be going out to bid hopefully later in the year. So anyone who's on here who is interested, be on the lookout for that. We'll have those bids out on the street by the end of the year. That is really a significant creek restoration effort, as well as parks and trails connectivity. And I think it'll really do a great job of stitching downtown and Rainy Street and Butler Trail all together along a very beautiful section of the creek. So that's phase 2. Phase 3 after that is really bringing it all together in the middle. And I think the single most important existing asset there is Palm Park. So that'll kind of really be the beginning of phase 3, is really engaging with the community about what the future of Palm Park looks like. And we've had conversations in the past, and particularly Palm Park with Palm School, and how those historic spaces work together to create a great public space. So that will kind of be the beginning of phase 3, hopefully. And then we're going to bring things together between 4th Street and 11th Street, connecting Symphony Square down with Palm Park and Creek Delta. So that's how we see the phasing, and it might be 3 might be broken up into smaller phases, based on constructability and fundraising. We're really always looking at those opportunities. So that's kind of how we see it phasing out over time. Around us, north of us, in the rest of Waller Creek, I mean, it's a great question. We're the southernmost portion of Waller Creek. The watershed is much bigger than us. We're only 1.5 miles, and we receive all the water that comes from the northern areas of Waller Creek. So our neighbors to the north and UT are doing a lot of work on Waller Creek right now. They did a great restoration of Waller Creek through the new medical school, and they have a lot of work ongoing through campus and have a focus in their campus master plan on Waller Creek and making improvements to Waller Creek. So we'll see that area receive improvements over time. The northern areas of Waller Creek beyond Waterloo Park do not have the benefit of a flood control tunnel. So those areas still have to be very responsive to flash flood events. And also beyond UT, it's a lot of small individual private property owners. So we really are looking to our partners in the Watershed Protection Department and their programs, which they've been developing over years, to improve, the floodplain in those areas and help make sure our entire watershed is clean and healthy. So we're excited about kind of expanding and working with Watershed Protection on, the entire watershed, but our focus in the near term is really building the Greenway from 15th Street down to the lake.
Yeah, thank you. So that wraps up all of our questions that were submitted. John, if you could take us to the last slide. We really appreciate you all joining us today. We will have another virtual tour in July. So please subscribe to our email newsletter, follow us on social media for those details, because we will be announcing the next date very soon. We do want to thank some folks who have been special supporters of ours. In this virtual world, we still need support. So a special thank you to our 2020 program sponsors, which include BBVA, the PAL Foundation, Susan Bond Foundation, Waterloo Sparkling Water, and the Word Company. And, these are difficult times for everyone in our community, but if you are interested in helping to support us and make sure that we can continue construction at Waterloo Park, please visit us at waterloogreenway.org/support and find out how you can be a part of Waterloo Greenway as well. Thank you all. We really appreciate you being with us today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, all.
Bye, everyone.